who don't want to be recorded, you can just turn your video camera off, and then we can't see you. So yeah, so
Okay.
often happens you're asked to turn them off during certain meetings. So apparently it helps the bandwidth. But anyway, carry on.
No problem. So yeah, Dr. Uchegbu, I mean, the thing is, you know, I always find when doctors specialize in certain things, I always wonder why.
Yeah.
So is there a link that you have diabetes, or was it just something that, you know, your career led you to?
For me, it was one of the chance events that I'm very grateful for and very thankful for, because when I got into it, and I was so thrilled that I would have missed an excellent opportunity to sort of use my skills, you know, in terms of practicing my art. Initially I wanted to specialize in care of the elderly. Yeah. So while I was waiting to get into the higher specialist training for it, I was working with a diabetes firm at the time. So it so happens that our registrar then, he's in Leicester, Dr. Steve Jackson, got appointed as a consultant. So they asked me to step up because I'm already kind of, you know, working in that capacity. So I stepped up, started, and then realized that I liked it. I said, I'm going to change my specialty and move into diabetes and endocrinology. So that's how I got into it. And I'm really pleased that I did.
How long have you been doing it for?
I've been a consultant in Barnsley now since 2006. So that's been for 15 years. And I did about 8 years training to get there. So I've done it for a pretty long time.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, as I say, I'm sort of learning because of my daughter, and, you know, we went on that journey together, you know, and it's your baby, you've got to be the one that sort of does the learning before they do.
Yeah.
You know, and I've learned so much about diabetes and how far it's come. Have you noticed a sort of big progression within, you know, sort of the treatment of diabetes, and, you know, how things have progressed so much?
Definitely. I've noticed a very fast pace of development over the past, let's say, 10 years. I remember when I was I did my research in London, and I had this lady who helped me to do a presentation, you know, about type 1. Actually, it's sort of to look at the historical aspects of type 1 diabetes. So she came with the needle, because this lady at the time, that was about 2001, 2002. So she came with her needle that she used, that the first needle she was given, you know, when she was diagnosed in, I think, 1944. And it was, if you sort of look at it and see what the needle was at that time, it was a stark difference. And then she came and also talked to the audience about her experience over the years, you know, how things has progressed. And that is quite, you know, uplifting. If you look at the, you know, because then she was, to check your glucose level, you boil your urine with a particular tablet, and you have to wait for so long for the color to change. And that's just an approximation. It doesn't give you an exact figure, you know, and they only do it when they come to hospital. And there was one, you know, the story she told us that was kind of quite amusing in a way, because she said she was diagnosed, she was about 14 at the time. And, you know, in the hospital, it's not like as our hospital is now. Yeah. They get assigned duties, you know, for patients.
Wow.
Yes. That is how it's done at the time. You know, you have to do something. And one of her roles is to clean the window during the time she was in hospital, because she was in hospital for a pretty long time, you know, to get used to the how to manage it. So that was how it was at that time. So, you know, if you compare it to how it is now, it is a lot different. And one good thing is that because the knowledge is a lot better, you do get some young people presenting with, you know, type 1 diabetes, but not in a stream. You know, I've come across cases where it was just by chance they used a family member's blood glucose meter to test because they're not feeling right. and it showed that the level is up. So they're able to come in much earlier before things, get a little bit more extreme. So there's been a lot of changes in the size of the needles, in the type of insulin, and also that is talking for, type 1, because there have been a lot of improvement in both types of diabetes, both type 1 and also for type 2. And but what I found most useful or most like a breakthrough is the way we now monitor. We now have different options of monitoring. So, it's more flexible, more dynamic. I'm referring to the Libre, the one that you wear a patch and then you just scan. A lot of my patients would say that it was very liberating.
Yeah.
Doing using that it kind of liberates them. It makes it a lot easier to self-manage and, and be kind of normal. Yeah.
My daughter's got the Libra.
Yeah.
And she had that for not long ago. She has the insulin pump now as well. And yeah, I mean, it's been remarkable for her, because I think, like the same with a lot of people, especially the children. Well, she did for a long time. And apparently this is a thing.
Yes.
They won't eat anything that's carved for a long time. So
Yes.
I thought she was going to turn into a tomato at one point.
Oh.
She just lived on tomato, peppers, cucumbers and ham. Now, most families would be like, oh my goodness, my kids are doing that. That's fantastic. Yeah. But then for me, I was like, no, because I knew why she wasn't doing it. And it was because she didn't want to keep pricking her finger and she didn't want to keep having to have the injection. Well, now she's a whiz at everything, she can work out what's on the back of a Snickers like you never know,
Oh, very good.
And so it is good. And like you say about the sort of progression with how things are going, I sort of want to go back. So I want to come on to that in just a second. Something that has been noted, and again, I've noticed, but I say I don't know whether it's because I'm living with it. Is there more children being diagnosed now than ever before, or is that because of what you said, because there's easier ways of diagnostics, or is it just because I'm aware a lot more?
I think that we have the statistics to support that, and the statistics shows that. Is that okay? Yeah. So, and the statistics support both type 1 and type 2. The prevalence or incidence is increasing, and a lot of things have been advanced as being responsible for this increase. But in general terms, the type 2 is the one that is increasing much more than the type 1. But generally, both of them, their incidence, both of them are increasing.
Do we know why? I mean, obviously, we know with type 2, is a lot to do with diet.
Yeah.
Obviously, with the type 1, it's the breakdown in the pancreas and supplying the insulin. Is there research going into why this is happening? Is it something, so for my generation, it's the kids that from my generation that seem to be getting diabetes more. Is it something that we may have done in the past? Or?
It's a bit more complicated than that. Type 1 is a situation where you have two things that need to work to sort of lead to this situation, and that is your gene and your environment. So, both of them are important. Like, there is a particular sort of set of, genes that will predispose to developing autoimmune diseases. That is, not only type 1, but other conditions where your body sort of starts seeing parts of it as foreign and attacking it. And it's all related to, a particular set of sort of antigens in what we call the HLA antigens. That's it's like the set of antigens, the set of genes that mediate how we interact with, let's say, foreign things to our body, that kind of thing. So, but you have that, but you also have the environment to help to work with it together. And so many things have been, been postulated but not yet confirmed. Things like viral illnesses, can be a trigger. You also have things like, some say, vitamin D deficiency. That is why we tend to notice, the reason is that they say you notice type 1 diabetes is more common in the northern hemisphere where there is less sun. And we also see it clinically in our practice because we tend to see more people diagnosed during the winter months than during the summer months. So these are the things. So it's not just one thing, it's just the environment and the gene working together to lead to the problem.
Do you know, I didn't know that. I really didn't know that, and how interesting that. I mean, obviously we know the importance of vitamin D. We know it for so many different things. Do you think that's why? Do you think that's known enough?
Not enough. I mean, the jury is still out, in that, in trying to figure out what was that. But, we know that it's not just having the genes. I mean, when you look at the genes, there are some genes that are protective and there are some genes that are predisposing, so a combination. So it depends. So it's a very sort of complicated expression, underlying cause. And that is why if you have, let's say, one autoimmune condition, you're more likely to have another. And what I mean is that autoimmune condition, things like, type 1 diabetes, celiac disease, rheumatoid arthritis, thyroid disorders, or sometimes you see a cluster within a family, where, one person may have type 1 diabetes, another has maybe overactive thyroid, one has celiac, one has a combination of them. So that is why, gene plays a role, but environment is also very important.
Yeah. I mean, we in our family, we carry the BRCA1 gene.
Okay.
But obviously that's a totally different thing altogether. Could that be something that, I mean, obviously Eva May, when she's old enough, will be tested if she wants to be.
Yes.
Would her diabetes play any kind of part in that? Could it have any kind of effect?
I've not explored the the relationship between the predisposing type 1 diabetes genes and BRCA genes, but in terms of having type 1, what it will mean for that, I'm not really certain what it will mean for it. Yeah.
Because I mean, obviously we know, again, it's been a sort of a big example of this, and I am, excuse me guys, I am talking sort of from my experience, because that's my only knowledge of things, and I'm hoping that, with everybody else here, maybe some of these things are sort of ringing true with you. I mean, again, we've sort of gone into winter months now, and because of isolation, everyone's been poorlier than they've ever been, haven't they? We've all been locked away and been sort of mollycoddled, so our immune systems are gone. So
exactly,
well, it is though, you sort of bite one bullet and get another. And with Eva May recently, she was poorly, and we could not get our bloods down. We couldn't do it. So we are in the knowledge that obviously any kind of sort of little illness, you do have to keep an eye on that. But as you say, things aren't moving forward so much. We got talking about the technology. Obviously we started with Eva May with the standard pen and the insulin pens, etc., and the finger pricking, and now we're on to the Libra and the pump. And it was funny because we actually said, my partner and my mum said, why don't they invent a machine that scans and then delivers? Doesn't seem to make sense. But now I'm hearing that might be the case.
Yes, very soon, yeah. Because like if the CGM, because you have the Libre, you also have the continuous glucose monitoring system like the Dexcom G6. So for the Dexcom G6, it can connect with a particular pump like the Tandem X2 Slim, and it could actually make it kind of auto suspend. Let's say if they notice that the glucose level is dropping, it can stop the pump from delivering insulin. So you can do that. And it also is coming up with a lot of what they call some clever sort of program that they can use, which sort of is automatic. It can run by itself. It's called the intelligent queue, as part of the tandem with the Dexcom G6. So things are moving. And interestingly also, we have also what we call, because that is what we call the closed circuit. It's a closed circuit. You have the insulin pump, you have the CGM, and you build a program that helps them to interact. Some patients living with type 1 diabetes have actually done their own program and they use it. They kind of have their own program which they use. And I know that the ABCD, the Association of British Clinical Diabetologists, are sort of trying to encourage them to come up to form like a a group so that we can understand what they do. But a lot of IT experts with living with type 1 diabetes have managed to build a program to help them to run auto without having to adjust each time.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you can imagine, can't you,
Yes.
in sort of so many years' time, that there will just be like a little chip
Yes.
that goes in, it doesn't seem out of the question.
It doesn't seem it looks within reach now.
Yeah, that's
it's
incredible.
within
I mean, that's
reach,
massive moves when we talk about, I was just been saying, we celebrate 100 years of insulin, and it's only 100 years ago there wasn't any. And,
yes.
A lot of these people that are here tonight, and my daughter is so thankful for that, it's amazing. So, thank you for all the work that you're doing. It really is. It's incredible how fastly things are moving forward. I want to move on to, to talk about type 2, because I don't want to dominate type 1 just because, I'm sort of affected by it. You're saying you're seeing a rise in type 2 and in children as well.
Yes.
I'm not going to lie, I'm not overly sort of up to date on type 2. And I'm sure, majority of you here probably are, but just to let us know that big difference between 1 and 2 in a nutshell, really.
Okay. For type 1, the way you think about it is that in someone living with type 1, the body doesn't make insulin, or it doesn't make enough to sustain it, right? And the commonest cause of that situation is a situation where the body just attacks the pancreas and destroys the cells that make insulin, and that is your type 1. So for type 1, you need insulin to live. Without insulin, your body goes into breakdown, and it can, make a lot of poisonous acid, which can lead to the body to shut down. And, when you lack the insulin, there's weight loss and, and these other symptoms, drinking, loss of fluid and so on. Then for type 2 is different in the sense that the body still makes insulin, and sometimes more than enough. The reason is that the body is not responding to the effect of the insulin. That is what we call insulin resistance. So that is what happens in type 2. So the type 2 is because the body is not responding to that effect because of insulin resistance. And things that increases insulin resistance is things like, being overweight, being older, and, things like family history and things like that. So that's the main distinction. But having said that, also for type 2 diabetes, because it's a progressive condition, things keep on, progressing over time. It gets to a point that the pancreas now stop making enough insulin to sustain. And that is when a type 2 will now require insulin in addition to other treatments.
And am I right in thinking with type 2, can it be reversed?
It can be, yes.
Yeah.
It can be.
Diet and exercise. Okay.
That's well, if it's not gone beyond the sort of point of no return, so to speak. It's reversible, within, let's say, the first 5-10 years of diagnosis, some even longer, but even if it's not reversed, the burden is a lot less, like with weight loss. For example, I also run I oversee a weight management clinic, and it's mainly, I see 60% of my patients living with type 2 diabetes, some with type 1, but some are just simple excess weight that we manage. And a good number of them with type 2, the diabetes goes into remission after they've lost weight through surgery. And it's so beautiful to see,
Right.
it's so beautiful to see,
Gives them a new lease of life.
Yes,
and
correct,
and when it comes to, I noticed with type 1 when I was learning, right? Again, please don't anyone take me wrong with this. When we was learning about what foods, sort of were free foods, so to speak, and what was best here, I did Slimming World. You won't think it, but I did do it a while ago, and the concept is very similar in the way that how the balance is, and sort of how you work out the majority of carbs to protein to fresh food. Would the same kind of diet be appropriate for type 2 as well?
It can be, yes, because when I speak with my dietitian colleagues, they often say, leave this thing to them. They generally, because that's one of the things, patients do sort of point out that they get a lot of conflicting messages. But generally, when it comes to weight management, yes, different proportion of, nutrients are important. But at the end of the day, what helps that weight loss process is when it's caloric deficient, when you have, you're taking it less than, you're burning. So that is when the weight comes off. And like the direct trial, the reverse diabetes diet, it is what we describe as it's a very low calorie diet. It is very low in calories. And but the good thing about it is that they have to make sure that it's balanced, despite the fact that it's low calorie. So it might have to make sure that it's balanced, because what you don't want to do is to kind of overstress the pancreas by exposing it to excess ready carbohydrates. So that is why it's important to balance it. But the principle behind it is to get the caloric level as low as possible. That is what that diet is all about. At the same time, you manage the nutrients so that the patient or the individual doesn't get nutritional deficiencies as a result. Yeah, and it does work. Yeah.
There's been a question. There was someone that Faye has said if there is an NHS low-calorie diet pilot available for newly diagnosed type 2 patients across South Yorkshire and Bassett Lord. There's a YouTube link there. Also, Lindsay's saying a diabetic tech, I think it was parents who got started on the looping, where the pump responds to the Dexcom blood sugar data. If you look on Twitter for #Night Scout, you may well come across it.
Yes.
Also, Tim's Pants. That's a good name, isn't it? That's a very interesting name. If you're pulling my leg with that, Lindsay, just trying to get me to Google something. So there's quite a lot on there as well. This is all in the chat for you to have a look at. But actually, if you don't mind, because Lindsay has said this, Lindsay's given me a present. Come over here. My daughter's here.
Okay.
She wanted to come and say hello.
Okay.
Say hello to everybody, darling.
Hello. How are you?
So there's lots of people. You can't see a lot of the people that are there. They're hiding. This is Lindsay there as well. And Lindsay's. You're going to say you do really well with your diabetes, don't you? Yeah. What have you got? You got your pump. Yeah. How've your bloods been today? They've been good today. She's been a little bit high overnight, so we've got to try and work out how we get it down overnight, haven't we? You like anything? Well, Lindsay's bought you a present, so if you don't mind, Lindsay's asked me if I can give her this present, if that's okay with you.
Oh.
Intermission break. You're going to open it in front of everybody. She's been waiting 24 hours for this present. I bribed her with it last night. To go to bed early. What you got? What is it? Is it something I want? This is the best Zoom ever. Oh my goodness. What's in there? What is that? 3 sheets of stickers. Amazing. What'd you say? Thank you. And what's this? No way. It belongs to the world. This is a diabetes t-shirt. What do you say? Hey, that's good, isn't it? She's been a little star. So even May, when she had a TikTok account, she started making TikTok videos and showing people how she does her injecting and making these little amazing videos, didn't you? Yeah, you're gonna write a song one day. Is that the plan? Yeah, cool. So say goodbye then to everybody. You look beautiful. Is there anything you want to say about diabetes while you're here? No. No, she's gone shy now. Oh, look, there's another one there. Thank you so much. Look, there's another one. Look, someone else is holding theirs up. That's your plating. That's good. Right, thank you. Go and enjoy.
Thanks, Lizzie. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry about that. That's where we
all
are.
Right. Now. Yeah.
Hi. This is life.
That's right. Yeah.
So I can't actually remember where we were with that. Yeah, I mean, how's it been for you during COVID? It's something that I sort of, again, mentioning this, even me being poorly only the week, she had a really bad cold, bloods were all over the place. It must have been a very scary time for anybody.
Well, it was very scary at that beginning part because we don't know what we're dealing with.
Yeah.
And you have, you're thinking of how do you keep your patients safe and at the same time not to lose them, because some out of fear, wouldn't, let's say they have a real need to come to the hospital, wouldn't do. Like for me, personally, within like Barnsley Hospital where I work, because I'm also the clinical lead for our diabetes service. So, and what happened then is that from April, we more or less, the time they shut the hospital down, basically, we only like running the COVID ward only. And that was a problem to me in the sense that I was very worried for, my vulnerable patients because, how to sort of arrange their care in this new situation we find ourselves in. So we did, particularly because for me that works in the hospital, I see a different side of the picture. I tend to see more of the complicated, complex patients and patients that need, a very well-defined care pathway. So if there is any distortion to that care pathway, it might mean, issues for them. And also on the back of that, there are also ones that are very, very complicated. Take, for example, I run the diabetic food service, and that is where, you get quite, patients that have a lot of complications that need, a lot of different services to keep things together. So what we now did is that, with the aid of IT, we all learned how to use IT very well because that was the only way. And then we had, like for the food service, we work with some podiatrists that are based in the community. So we now have like a system. If you have, let's say, a complex patient, we want to see what's going on, they pay a home visit. And while they're there, we all sort of see each other through Microsoft Teams, and we can consult with the patient there. So that we did bit of that. And, the telephone, and we also have like telephone video consultation, but the bit that, I wasn't quite happy with my organization, what happened is that, when they shut everywhere down, and then when they now reopened, they felt because we happened to, the diabetes ward happens to be side by side with the chest ward, respiratory ward. So they felt that the right thing to do is to convert the diabetes ward into a COVID ward. So that is what they did. So they will only have COVID positive patients. So if, let's say, someone with, diabetes related problem gets admitted into the hospital, they don't now come to our ward, they now go somewhere else. And sometimes it takes a while for you to know of them, and it increases their length of stay, and it sort of, their experience is not as good. So that was the thing I found most challenging, during that time. And it's also, I felt very hot by that because it's that same kind of underdog diabetes has always been, it kind of, you feel, the specialty is not considered serious, kind of important enough to protect it. So that is what happened then. And even now we are sort of having like the sort of another wave, they've gone back and done the same thing where our ward is mainly a COVID ward. So if, let's say, someone coming in with diabetes related problem that is COVID negative, they will not be sent to our ward, they'll be sent somewhere else. And before we know to get there, so that's, I don't know what happens in other hospitals, whether they have the same experience as us, but that is how, what happened in our own setup, which, I did, bring it up that is not desirable at all for my patients because they're the most vulnerable and should be protected, but the system did not protect them as much as I would have loved.
Yeah, that must have been so hard for you.
Yeah.
Because again, like you say, you go on a journey with these people.
Correct.
And, at the moment we're with Eva May sort of every 3 months. into the hospital, and you get to know that patient, and you get,
Yes.
and I suppose it's like anything, you kind of get to know what their data is, and
Correct. Yeah.
yeah, you know,
Yeah.
it's just it's one of those things when you do it so often. So that must have been so hard, and I'm sorry you had
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
to deal with that.
Because you know, therefore, like one of the things I find most rewarding is, you know, because I also take part in the young adult clinic. You know, you see them as a teenager and they kind of mature, you know, and in fact, I had one that I saw the other day, and she was apologizing for being very difficult when she was a teenager. She told me that, yeah, she told me she's now matured, you know. I just, you know, I said, you know, that's because she was a little bit of a handful.
Oh, bless it. You know, I do think to myself, you know, that I'm very lucky in the respect that Eva May got diagnosed at the age that she did, because she was young enough to be sort of sponge-like and to adapt.
Yes.
And I can imagine having a later diagnosis, you know, through the teenagers, but even older, must be very, very difficult to adapt to it, especially a teenager, you know, who just wants to rebel against anything. I mean, don't please nobody tell anybody this. But we were talking, me and Eva May the other night, and she was on about sort of, oh, when I'm older, I will go to the pub. And I said, well, don't forget, you know, you've got to equate any carbs that are in your glass of one glass of rosé that you're allowed. And she was like, I wonder how many carbs there are in a glass of rosé. So we ended up Googling. and unfortunately we found that there's no carbs in gin. So I thought, well, that's all right. I'll stick to that diet then. We're all right. But it must be very, very difficult for the for people that have lived a certain way of life for so long to then have to monitor everything. Like say with Eva May, adapted quite easily. But actually, Eva May, someone's asking you a question here. Someone's just asked you a direct question saying, when your blood sugars go high, how do you feel?
I usually feel a little bit dizzy or a little bit clumsy.
And a bit sick, don't you, sometimes? And you're very, what happens when you go low?
I feel shaky and everything is like whirling around.
A bit dizzy with stuff. I hope that's answered your question. We were beginning to wonder, weren't we, darling? Because she's been sort of complaining of tummy ache quite a bit. And a friend of ours with type 1 has just recently got a gluten intolerance. A little bit later on what you've just mentioned there as well about potentially celiac, etc., whether it might be worth getting her tested for those kind of intolerances. Would you recommend people with diabetes to test for these intolerances, or would you just know?
We do it like I don't know what they do in the pediatric service in terms of annual review bloods, but I know that in the young adult and adult service, well, less in the adult service because by then everything is a little bit clearer. Like in the young adult service, for their annual review every year, we do thyroid function, we do celiac screen as part of, and during the process, we picked up a few celiacs. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So that is part of what would happen.
What happened to, yeah.
Right, okay. Cameron sent a message as well saying, what stresses the pancreas? He says he missed that. He's currently on a low carb diet.
You know, because what happens is that when it depends, is the glucose load.
Right.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. So a very high glucose load will sort of, the pancreas will struggle to mount enough insulin response to clear it. But also the amount of fat is also one of the things that can also stress the pancreas out.
Right, so it is purely that. I've read a couple more messages here, sorry, while I just go through these. We are finding in Sheffield that people with diabetes, especially type 2, have noticed deterioration in their diabetic control over the pandemic. We are running a pilot scheme in the north of the city where people of South Asian communities can act as support. Pharmacists, and the feedback from them is very good indeed. She worked alongside the 5 practices, and we are finding that people's health is improving, which is that's brilliant. That is very, very good. Just watch out with drinking alcohol, is more likely to go low than high with alcohol, I think, was a direct message. Alec, how can someone reverse type 2 diabetes? How do we know what type of diabetes we've had, as a message that's coming from Galaxy S9?
One is the history, how it developed, you know, is part of what will help you to know which one, because for type 2, sometimes it's very quiet. You don't feel ill. A lot of people is incidental. In fact, according to the most recent statistics, they said about 850,000 people at this point in time are living with type 2 diabetes and they don't know about it, So it's kind of quite silent. You don't have symptoms typically, but in type 2, you can also have symptoms like things like recurrent thrush, feeling very thirsty, drinking lots of fluid. There could be some weight loss, recurrent infections, some blood vision, but also there have just been nothing. You don't feel any different. Just go for a blood test, and it was picked up. The health check, that health check program. A lot of people were diagnosed during that process. Although I don't know, it's still the program. I don't think the program is still on. At the 40 years and 50 years, where they have this sort of MOT kind of thing. So, so that is, how it is. Sometimes people don't know. It just by chance, they just go for a blood test and they just are told. And my experience, they find it a little bit more difficult to take in because they will say, how come I feel well? So why is this? So that is, that's how it presents.
Yeah, I can imagine that. And like say, for me with Eva May, and obviously after speaking with George on the radio, and again a friend of mine who I interviewed some time back with the type 1, I feel like I'd had enough information to recognise the signs for Eva May. She had dramatic weight loss quite quickly. She was so thirsty quite a lot of the time. And then what we've realised now as well, and I find, as a mum, I felt so bad because I kept telling her off for being clumsy. But actually, that was, I know, you can imagine the mum guilt that I got and the amount of presents that had to come after that. But it's, they are massive signs to look out for. But I will say, when I took her, she had bellyache and she wasn't eating. And she kept saying she feels really sick. And I took her to the doctors. And they didn't check her, right? It was only when I pushed and said, I do think you need to check her blood sugars, because they was going to say that it was just tummy infected, just a tummy upset. And she kind of very reluctantly tested her blood sugars, and then it just came back high. Do you think that there's enough within the GPs to push for these kind of testing? Because actually, it's not a big deal to do it.
Correct. Yes. Yeah, I quite agree. It's not a big deal. I think that is the case of education. Yeah, them being able to do it. Because I remember when I started in Barnsley, we had a case where a young, I think 10 years at the time, came in with very severe diabetic ketoacidosis, ended up in ITU. And what the problem was the speed of referral was very slow. This child was brought in by the parents not feeling right. They first of all diagnosed oral thrush, sent him home, and then they came back again. They checked the urine, not even blood, and it was plus of glucose. Rather than sending the child straight to the hospital, they booked the child to come back the next day for a fasting blood glucose. So what then happened during the night, was rushed in as an emergency unconscious. So some is education. No doctor is out there not to pick it up, but it's just that to have that high index of suspicion to do it. Yeah, that's what is. Yeah.
And we understand there's a lot of pressure, all the time. Dr Elizabeth Uchegbu, thank you. I could speak to. I feel like it has just been me and you for a bit. I feel like I've commandeered your son. I feel like we're going to be friends for a long time. That is for sure. I do have to bring in right now. You've been absolutely amazing. I'm sure we'll come back to you as well. I do have to bring in another one of our guest speakers who we're really looking forward to hearing from tonight, Dr Seleena Thukral, a Sheffield GP specialising in diabetes. Is Dr Seleena there?
Yeah, hi there.
Hello, how are you? Have I said your name right? I've got to this age now where I don't lie anymore, right? And because I've worked on radio for so long, I can't get away with it. Have I said your name right, darling?
Very close. Thukral, a bit like a tuk-tuk.
Thukral, that's it. That's amazing. So obviously, you are a Sheffield GP specialising again in diabetes, and the same question goes to you as I asked Elizabeth as well. What was there a reason that you wanted to specialise in diabetes, or was it just, you know, was there a history, or why was it?
Yeah, so I've had an interest in diabetes ever since medical school. Actually, I did an extra year studying diabetes and endocrinology. I also, the reason I guess I call myself a GP specialising in diabetes medicine is I was training as a diabetes hospital specialist in London, and then I relocated to Sheffield and transitioned to doing GP training. And so I guess you know, my career and my personal interest means that I've also been able to appreciate all the different journeys and that you know, a diabetic patient of any type of diabetes will go on through the NHS, and it's just something I'm really interested in and passionate about.
And as we've just been talking with Elizabeth as well, like, you know, it must be quite fascinating actually for you guys because of the speed that everything seems to be moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just, yeah, even within the last 10 years, the way we look after people is so different. And particularly with type 2 diabetes, I mean, just the array of medication that we can you know, consider now is so different, and it's really nice to be able to personalize approaches to different people in their lives, and that's what I'll be talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I understand that you do have some slides and a bit of a talk that you're going to do yourself, so we'll hand it over to you, Seleena.
Sure. Okay, so I shall see if I can share my screen. There we go. So can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. So thank you first of all for having me. It's a real privilege to be here and talking with you all today. So I guess I've explained that I'm a GP in Sheffield and my own personal interest in diabetes. So when I was thinking about, you know, what this evening and where to start in terms of why diabetes matters and why we should celebrate it, lots of different things came into my mind. But then I realized for me, it really does boil down to something relatively simple. And that is that diabetes matters because people matter. So you matter, individuals matter. You're not just a statistic about diabetes, you're a person who has diabetes. So diabetes matters to me because people matter, and people make families, people make communities, whether that be a local community, national or global, and people make organizations that bring about positive change. I think from my perspective, if there's anything I can do in my life and career to support the health and well-being of people, then that's really important. And in terms of what health actually means, for me, that equates to kind of freedom and independence to do what you want to do in your life. So if we can do anything to support patients with diabetes to live their life and be free to live their life in a way that's meaningful to them, then that's really important. And we know that diabetes has a profound impact on, you know, patients' physical and emotional well-being. So that's why, you know, I echo what Dr Uchegbu said, that it's so important to screen for diabetes, it's so important to diagnose it, and it's so important to support patients to manage it. So I was trying to think about how I could perhaps reflect on the patient journeys that I've experienced in my career, and perhaps reflect on how individuals may experience diabetes. Sorry, I've come too fast. And I'm afraid that the thing I ended up turning to was a slightly kind of cheesy, cringy quote about life. But I hope you'll bear with me, and hopefully we'll be able to relate to it on some level. So the cheesy quote is, they say time flies, and the good news is that you're the pilot. And I heard this and I thought, well, I think being diagnosed with diabetes sometimes feels like somebody's come along and just changed your plane overnight. So bear with me a second while I try to explain that. So you're the pilot, you know about planes, and overnight somebody's just changed the plane that you're in. Now you're still the pilot, and but with this new plane, the engine's different, the fuel is different, the parts are different, but this is yours now. So sometimes you fly this new plane and it flies like an absolute dream, you're having a great day. And then there's other times where the plane nearly crashes and it knocks your confidence a bit, and you're a bit more cautious. And then other days you fly this new plane and it does perhaps crash into something, it hits something, a part might be broken, the part might be fixed. But you always remember that day because you're the pilot, you own this plane, and you dread it happening again. So it's always there and kind of affects you on those other good days. And some days as a pilot of this new plane, you just think, gosh, I just wish I had my old plane back. It was just so much more familiar and so much easier. But with time and experience, you expend kind of patience, determination, and openness to living your life in a new way. And each day feels slightly better. And so I hope that makes some sort of sense. And I promise that that's as abstract as I'm going to be with my examples today. And we'll talk about some more concrete things if that applies to you in the next slide. So as this image shows, there is a lot that must go through the head of a patient with diabetes. And I want to just spend some time reflecting on that and talking about that. Now, in terms of, all of you here today, some of you may have diabetes, some of you may know somebody with diabetes or work with somebody who has diabetes, or just have an interest in it. And what I plan to do now is talk about some of the challenges and hardships that some patients with diabetes go through. And I think that's in order to recognise the resilience of our patients with diabetes and the grit and determination that we see. But I also want to point out that in my career, certainly, I've seen some patients with diabetes where actually the diagnosis of diabetes, and admittedly this is more common in patients with type 2, that having a diagnosis of diabetes actually improves people's sense of well-being and health because, for example, it instigates positive change in their life. So, for example, I've had some patients with type 2 diabetes where it spurred them on, for example, to change their diet into something that helps them to lose weight, their knees and their hips feel better. They pick up a new activity or a sport that they fall in love with that they think they never would have tried actually if they didn't have something to spur them on to do it. They join a community support group perhaps and develop new best friends. So please don't kind of, I guess, walk away from this evening or the slide that I'm about to present and think, gosh, diabetes just only creates problems. It's everyone's experience is different. So coming back to this image of what could go on in the head of somebody diagnosed with diabetes, naturally I think there can be questions about identity and accepting a diagnosis. So for example, well, why me? Why have I got diabetes? Why now? And what does this mean? Am I just going to be known as a diabetic, or do I remain, for example, Seleena and I have diabetes? And those can be some really important questions, and something that isn't just reflected on at the point of diagnosis, but later down the line too. Also, a lot of reflection on dependence on external factors. I think having diabetes can give you a sense of vulnerability, particularly if you require medications, things like insulin or tablets, that, well, where am I going to get my medication from? Will I get it? Can I access healthcare when I need it? Can I, will I always get my glucometer? And I think that's, we're very lucky in the UK that we've got the NHS and the infrastructure that we have, but this is clearly a major problem in developing countries. There's also the need for day-to-day routines. So the ritual of test, eat, treat, repeat, test, eat, treat, repeat for some patients. And for some patients, that kind of routine in their life can be very stabilizing. For others, it can feel quite intrusive. And for others, it can just feel really relentless. There's also, as one of my patients put it as well, it can be a massive faff having diabetes, particularly if you do have to carry equipment like snacks in case of a hypo, or a glucometer or needles for insulin, can just feel like it's just an extra thing to remember in the busy world that we all live in. So we've talked a bit about identity and identifying as somebody who has diabetes, and also the fact that I always think that having diabetes feels like you've just been lumped with a new job that you didn't quite apply for. Like all of a sudden you have to think on behalf of your body in a way that you never had to before. You almost have to think like a pancreas, particularly if you have type 1 diabetes. And we've touched upon the fact that it can create this sense of vulnerability through kind of dependence on external things. And I also think it's important to mention that a patient with diabetes has to shoulder so much responsibility and burden in terms of the ongoing conversations about the risk of diabetic complications. And I think only a patient with diabetes really understands what it's like to live with that day in, day out. The other thing I would like to talk about in terms of what could be going through the head of somebody with diabetes is their emotional well-being. And I feel that perhaps as a profession and a community, we need to talk about this so much more with patients with diabetes. So there is actually a term called diabetes distress, which reflects the fact that patients can go through emotional distress, low mood, low self-esteem, frustration, or feeling overwhelmed sometimes due to the challenges of daily management of diabetes. And at its worst extreme, that can lead to something called diabetes burnout, where some people just literally are physically or emotionally exhausted by all the effort it's requiring, and particularly if they feel that they're not seeing the improvement they hope to see. Now, one thing that's really interesting with diabetes burnout is that sometimes one of the main features of it is perhaps very elevated or variable blood sugars, which can be really mislabeled as non-compliance with medication or non-compliance with testing and so forth. And I think it's so important that we are mindful of how diabetes can impact people's emotional well-being, so that we can support patients in this feeling this way, rather than risking mislabeling them as non-compliant and exacerbating the problem. So far I've talked about what thoughts might be going through the mind of a patient with diabetes, very much related to their own mind and perhaps what's happening in their body or to their body. But I think it's also important to touch upon what happens with what others say and what others do to a patient with diabetes and the impact of that. So some people are lucky to have a support network where perhaps people are very empathetic or very understanding and keen to learn more. But unfortunately, of course, there are others who aren't quite in that position and might say things that don't feel so helpful. So some examples are things like, gosh, should you really be eating that? Or, oh gosh, I could never inject myself. And I think this reflects the need for public education and awareness about diabetes and how it impacts people and how it's managed, which I hope events like this will continue to support with. So, I mean, literally, diabetes can affect every realm of life. And as I said, I'm not trying to be downbeat or pessimistic, but I really do find that our patients with diabetes are incredible. They're so resilient and can be determined. And I just want to reassure any of you who may be there, who may have diabetes or know somebody with diabetes, there is always a team of people eager to help you. You've got your practice nurse, your GP, pharmacist, psychologist, community dietitian, Diabetes UK, and of course, you haven't even started talking about the hospital team, diabetic specialist nurses, consultants. There's so many of us who really, really want to support patients with diabetes and their families with this journey. So today you are you, that is truer than true. There is no one alive that is youer than you. I just want to put this Dr. Seuss quote here, just to remind us all that patients with diabetes are still individuals, and that their care needs to be personalised to them and their life. And that's so important. And we are so lucky that we've got so many more options in many respects now than we did previously. I know when we talk about diabetes, often we give examples of celebrities and famous people like Stephen Redgrave, the Olympic rower, and Halle Berry. But I think it's important to remember that every individual is so important. You don't have to be as extreme as a celebrity to show that you can live life with diabetes. Just living your own life in the way you want to is important, and every doctor should take, and nurse and healthcare professional should take that seriously. So I've basically kind of, I guess, thought out loud with you about how it may feel to be have diabetes as an individual, but I would like to spend a bit of time in my second half of my presentation just talking about two specific kind of subgroups of patients with diabetes. So the first is patients with pre-diabetes and type 2 diabetes, and the second is about families and future generations. So these graphs just show a projection of the prevalence of diabetes and some of the disability that can be associated with diabetes between 1990 and 2025. And actually 2025 is not that far away now. Now, the green line is type 1 diabetes. And actually, I realized as Dr. Uchegbu was talking that maybe this graph is not representing reality enough, in that it's not showing the slight increase in type 1 diabetes. But what it does show with the red line is actually the truth that rates of type 2 diabetes are going up. And unfortunately, this can be associated with an increased risk of premature death and some other disability. But my main concern is what Dr Uchegbu touched upon, which is that actually there are so many patients who don't know they have type 2 diabetes because they have no symptoms, or the symptoms can creep up so slowly that it can feel like a new level of normal. And I've lost count of the number of patients I've had with type 2 diabetes who said, gosh, I just really didn't realize how rubbish I felt until I started having treatment for diabetes and addressing it, which I think demonstrates the point. Now, type 2 diabetes can feel quite deceptive because it produces no symptoms, and or the symptoms can be so subtle. So I just wanted to perhaps talk about ways that we can try to address this. So I'd encourage any of you, if you're not sure if you've got diabetes, or if you know somebody who isn't sure, then encourage them to try the Know Your Risk tool on the Diabetes UK website, which helps you to kind of analyse your own risk assessment. And just like Dr Uchegbu touched upon, there are these NHS health checks if you're over 40, which are worth doing. And I also would recommend reflecting on your own family history. So for example, if you have multiple members of your family who've got this diagnosis of type 2 diabetes, but when they're a bit young, so under the age of 50, and if you've got multiple family members with those, I think that also warrants having a conversation with your GP about diabetes tests, because there are some forms of diabetes that are rarer, that aren't type 1 and they're not type 2, where often we can see a bit of a family pattern like this. I would hope that most of you are aware of the common symptoms that I think have already been discussed today of diabetes, things like increased thirst, fatigue, changes in weight, particularly weight loss. But I would just like to remind you of things like recurrent thrush, which is like a white coating on the tongue, or on the genitals you can have an itchy rash, recurrent or very stubborn skin fungal infections, erectile dysfunction for men, that can all be presentations of diabetes or a feature of diabetes, to make sure you speak to your GP and arrange a blood test. We also do see diabetes in association with some other health problems that I think people don't always think of. So, working night shifts, having psoriasis, being told you've got extra fat in your liver. These are all things that can be associated with an increased risk of type 2 diabetes. So I would just encourage you, if you've got any concern whatsoever, we'd much rather identify patients with type 2 diabetes and provide support as early as possible, particularly given that we do see maximum reversibility in the first 5 to 10 years. So the next part that I want to talk about are families and what I call the snowball effect. So on the right here, we've got a bit of a family tree. And what I'd like to try and illustrate is that the NICE guidelines, which stands for the National Institute of Clinical Excellence, which produces a lot of evidence-based guidelines for all of us doctors and medical teams in the UK. So they recognise pregnancy as a stage of life that increases the vulnerability, or what they call a vulnerable life stage, and an associated increased risk of things like obesity. And that's not just for mums, it's also for dads. We know that bringing a new child into the world can be very challenging. Now, if we start with parents who perhaps have type 2 diabetes or are obese, for example, which puts them at much higher risk of type 2 diabetes, then their child, before that child is even born, is at higher risk of diabetes and obesity themselves. So that means that child in the mummy's tummy at the point of birth is up to 6 times more likely to develop that. So if you imagine we've got 2 parents, they have 3 children, those 3 children are all at higher risk. And if those 3 children all have children, then there's a lot more children in that subsequent generation at higher risk of obesity and type 2 diabetes. And that's what I call the snowball effect. But what is also crucial to realise here is that, particularly as a group of adults, is that we role model behaviours. And what this kind of family model shows is that we have so many opportunities to intervene and to support people and educate people to tweak and improve their behaviours, to reduce the risk of diabetes or reduce the impact of diabetes. And that behaviour in that one person can be role modelled for other people and have a huge impact on a whole family unit. And I just think that's amazing, and that's just so powerful. And so I'd encourage all of you to just give yourself credit. So if you speak out loud, if you think out loud about something that's healthy to do. So for example, if you say, gosh, it's a nice day, I'm going to go out for a walk after lunch, recognize that you might be starting up a lifelong habit for somebody around you, whether it's your partner, your child, your grandchild, your neighbour, your colleague. That could be what feels like a small thing, could become a huge thing in improving the life of others. And I think sometimes we don't give ourselves enough credit for these little micro changes that we make in our life and the positive impact of it. I think it's also, in terms of talking about role modelling and thinking out loud, is really important to recognise the value of support groups like Diabetes UK. Now, there's a lot of evidence that diversity of thoughts, so thinking differently, is really important for personal growth, sharing ideas and development in humans. And I think the beauty of forums like Diabetes UK and groups like this is that you've got lots of different people. You've got a common factor of diabetes, but everyone's approach and everyone's life and needs are different. And by sharing our different experiences, we can really enhance each other's lives. So I think, diabetes is a puzzle that we're yet to completely understand, but we've definitely clearly seen huge progress, over the years as we're marking, the 100-year anniversary of insulin. And I think, just like diabetes matters because people matter, we should celebrate diabetes and World Diabetes Day, just as we celebrate other things for people like birthdays and anniversaries, because we have come so far. Insulin is literally a life-saving drug. Technology has been incredible at revolutionizing things and reducing the frequency of finger prick testing and injections. And it's so exciting to see that there's going to be so much more use for it. And as I say, having diabetes is challenging, but it also draws out an incredible strength of character in patients and resilience in many patients. And I think it's so important to recognise that journey and to encourage patients with diabetes to be kind to themselves. So be kind to yourself and be open about how you're feeling. And let's all try to make sure that we're checking in with each other about each other's kind of emotional tank and how it's all going, as much as we ask each other about blood sugars and HbA1cs. So thank you for listening, and I hope that's been useful. I'm happy to talk about any or have any questions.
Unmuted. I think I'm unmuted now. Seleena, that was lovely. Thank you so much for that. And what was so awesome? And again, I'm listening to this as a mother of a little girl who's got type 1. So, when you were showing the head with all of these questions in it and everything in it, that's mine. I'm like, have we got cookies? Have we got sweets? Can I remember what the orange thing does? You know what I mean? And there is so much. And my again, in the schools, they've been very good at you may doing a speech in front of all the other students as well to sort of say what her diabetes is, and there's another boy in her class as well. But I think you're right. I think now living with it, and statistics are so high as what they are, people do need to be aware. It's like this other hidden illness, isn't it? It's this other hidden thing that people just don't get, and it's a task.
Yeah, it's so true. And I guess, maybe I should emphasize why I call it the quiet pandemic, is that we've all heard about COVID, we all know about COVID. But diabetes somehow just kind of seems to simmer in the background. It's kind of felt like that for years. But I think we'll get there, and already there's just so much. I guess part of social media, there is better awareness to some extent, and I think we've got a really kind of confident youth now who do speak up and do take the opportunity to speak up and share. And I think hopefully we'll move into a culture of sharing vulnerability more, and I hope we can kind of encourage that culture, because I think that's what we all relate to as human beings. Ultimately, we all feel vulnerable about something in our lives, so I'm sure we'll only see improvement here. And it's fantastic to hear that your daughter's done a talk at school. That's amazing.
Yeah, and and again, it's sort of like, well, why am I going emotional now? But it is, you sort of take it for granted, in the respect that you should think, well, they should do, sort of thing. But actually, but it is nice, because again, what you were saying with of how people view it. I mean, we had an incident at the school where somebody said her diabetes was disgusting or whatever. Do you know what I mean? And I just think this education is what's needed. And I'm so lucky that I've got a little girl that's so kind of pragmatic and just went, I don't know what he's talking about. You know, she sees it as this sort of part of her that's special now, you know, and something that makes her unique, really. And also, she's also clocked on quite quickly that if she equates for enough insulin for this big bag of sweets, that she has to eat them all. She didn't like it when she had a pop and then didn't realise there was a multi-wave. Do you know what I mean? And don't, not that now. So, you know, things are sort of progressing so much. You know, there's a question here: has the pandemic held up diabetes initiatives that were becoming priorities? So many resources diverted from the progress. Has that had an effect?
Yeah, I mean, yes. So the reality is that particularly at the height of COVID and the lockdowns, a lot of things felt like they were stalled. I have to say, you know, certainly, you know, the practice I work at, we've tried our best to keep up with things like, you know, annual reviews of diabetes, and, you know, literally the only, in terms of having consultations with GPs, the only step that's been introduced is a phone call. It's, you know, we've been seeing people face to face throughout the pandemic. Yeah. Of course, we had to make that a safety measure to make sure anyone who came to the practice would, you know, would maintain the kind of safety of avoiding a whole practice or patients developing COVID. But I'd like to think that we've been there as best as we can be. But yes, I'm sure there are kind of community projects that have been stalled, or, you know, weight management projects where just because you couldn't have people face to face, but, you know, clearly Zoom meetings have taken off. So, you know, this is what I mean about resilience, is that if you want to, you know, if we want to do something, we will find a way to do it.
Oh, I love that. That's absolutely amazing to hear. And, you know, we did hear earlier on from Elizabeth that, you know, of course, rates have gone up because of the pandemic. And, you know, I think we were all guilty of it, that, you know, boredom increased weight loss. Weight gain, rather. I wish it was the other way around. You know, and then, of course, you know, Elizabeth saying that, you know, her ward was being used as a COVID ward, etc. You know, it seems to have had a significant impact, really. But is it like what it is in the fact that it will be quick to recover?
I hope so, because I think in a way we also, because of, you know, the good thing that's come out of COVID, I think, is that hopefully we do have access to some better resources, particularly relating to tech. I mean, you know, the option now of the phone call, the video call, or the face-to-face is a much bigger menu than what we had before.
Yeah.
You know, the old kind of traditional model of, oh, you know, if you need to speak to somebody, you phone up and you wait to get the next available face-to-face, unless it's a real crisis. I think actually some of the new system of working is actually a lot more efficient and effective. But I know it is a bit of a transition year, and perhaps it can be alienating for some people who don't feel quite as comfortable with technology. So perhaps, you know, if you thought that perhaps, you know, if this meeting had happened face to face today in a hall or something, then maybe there may have been a few people who would have felt so much more comfortable with that rather than going on Zoom, or may not even know what a Zoom meeting is. So unfortunately, there's pros and cons, but I would say on balance, and particularly for the future generations, I'd like to think that we've got, you know, a lot more flexible options now, which is a good thing.
What would you like to see happen next? You know, if we could, because, you know, again, when we were talking to Elizabeth and she was explaining how, I was quite sort of, whoa, really, you know, how they used to test for blood sugars, you know, the size of the needles that used to be used, you know, all of that kind of stuff. And then, you know, boom, where we are now. And, you know, my daughter's grandma got in touch and said, there's a machine that does everything, you know, which we were only sort of talking about the other day, going, well, that'd be genius. Why doesn't that work? You know, surely that linked together. Then there was something on the telly about that. What would you like to see, you know, ideally? What do you think is actually practical?
Yeah, I think from a practical perspective, I mean, having, you know, so much easier access and availability to all of the tech, you know, so that people don't have to finger pricks as much anymore, or a finger prick at all, or inject, would be incredible. But I guess before we can kind of get to that gold standard, you know, dream for everyone, I think sometimes we also need to recognize where we're at and whether it kind of feels equitable and fair. So, for example, you touched upon the fact that, a lot of people in COVID and the lockdowns have gained weight and the rates are increasing. But actually, if you look at the rates of increase, there is a much more marked increase in the rates of diabetes and obesity, and even within children, in areas of social deprivation. And it's big, it's not even a small decrease. It's we're in areas of socioeconomic deprivation. That's within the UK.
Yeah.
So if we then start to expand and think about the world and the fact that, you've got some people in some countries where they have to walk 3 days to get to a healthcare facility, let alone even know if they can get insulin there. There is just such a huge national but also global disparity between people's healthcare. And I think what would be really nice is to, of course, have gold standards and achieve, aim for that, but also make sure that we're bringing up everybody to that, at some sort of minimum level, and then take everyone forward. And I hope that's not too far-fetched a dream.
Well, I think with the likes of you behind it, darling, I don't think it's going to be far off. I really don't. The passion, but it is. I mean, you speak with it so passionately, so did Dr. Elizabeth, and what I find so lovely is how much you care. And I mean, that for me, for a little girl that's going through this, and obviously everybody that's watching this right now, that must, mean a hell of a lot, because you can sometimes go into a job, can't you? And you just like, well, this is my role and this is what I have to do. Yeah. But you've gone into that and you've looked into that and gone, actually, no, this has this effect. It has this effect, this mental effect. So how do we deal with this moving forward? Because, we've got to look at this age range and this age range from that age, and how are they going to deal with that? And then there's the other side of stuff, and how you've delved into that so massively, I just think fantastic. And you're covering, covering so many bases to actually understand that. And I think, that's what, and again, please do ask me if I can help you again in the future, because I think that awareness out there, and also that love and that care for parents as well as other family members that live with people that are diabetic, is also really important.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Has anybody got any questions right now that they would like to put forward? Please do ask. I don't want to dominate all of this.
I just want to contribute very quickly. Thank you, Seleena, for that excellent presentation. What I want to say, the impact of COVID that's quite positive to me, is that during the time we worked very closely with, like, at least in Bangui where I work, with the GPs. It was as if we are one family trying to sort the same problem out, and we helped each other out a lot. And that is what I found, that was very, very positive, coming from, from the stresses of COVID. You give them a ring and we all sort of work together, try to, sort an issue out. So that is very good. It kind of brought us together, because we had a common enemy. So we had to sort of pull together and try to fight it. Yeah.
A big round of applause right now. I think that sounds amazing. Well done, guys. Honestly, it's heartwarming. It really is. And I don't know about you, Lindsay, or Shirley, and everybody else that's watching. It's quite exciting, to think that the progressions that are being made and the passion that people have that are helping towards this. It's incredible. It really is.
Yeah, there were excellent speakers there, and I'm a type 2 who is back in remission, so I did that myself. But right. I recently went to the GP because through the pandemic I put weight on, and it was strange because she said to me, "Who diagnosed you?" And I thought, well, I didn't do it myself. And I sort of was like this. Yes, so some GPs are great, other GPs you could just go.
Yeah.
So I think that if I had you as a GP, Seleena, I would be really honoured.
Thank you, that's very kind of you. But I guess just like I talked about the fact that we need to improve public education and awareness, it is an ongoing endeavour to talk about with our team members. But I know there are lots of GPs who feel like actually it's such a fast changing area that they can't keep up to speed sometimes with the changes in the medication options and the lifestyle options. And if you can imagine from their perspective, you're trying to manage so many different things that happen to the body, they can feel that themselves. But I have to say, most of the GPs I've worked with and been lucky enough to work with, they're also you're keen to learn more and keen to engage. So I hope you have better experiences going forward. But I guess, you know, perhaps invite your GP to the next Diabetes UK meeting, and you know, sorry, one thing I forgot to say, I must say, is that the Diabetes UK videos that have been done by patients are absolutely incredible. So if anything, you know, just share with your friends, your family, anyone you know who wants to understand more about diabetes, and even your GP if you need to, share the links to the videos, because, you know, patients really are the experts of their own long-term conditions, and those videos, I think, exemplify that.
Yeah.
And Becky, just to say that my great niece and nephew were type 1 and they were diagnosed quite early, so I can understand what they're going through, because at that point they used to have an alarm clock at school, and it used to go off when it was ready for them to eat, you know, have to have a snack. But obviously other people around them didn't know, and the same. And if we had like an assembly, and it used to be, why is he eating? And it's that education that you need, because, you know, they're thinking, oh, he can have a chocolate bar or he can have a biscuit, but he's having it for a reason. And unless they know that, it you know, that education's letting them down. But
100%.
persevere, she will get through it. They're both now, one's 30 and one's 27, so they've grown up with it.
Oh, thank you for that. And I think, you know, she's so pragmatic about stuff, and so very good, you know, with everything like that. But I think it's just sort of brought up you know, a key factor that, you know, there is still maybe that lack of education there, and still maybe that sort of lack of awareness. And I feel very, very honoured that the job that I do, you know, sort of on the radio, that I've had the pleasure of interviewing people and learning about diabetes, and that's why I knew what to look out for. And that's why I knew to say to the doctor, please test her blood sugars, because of that. So, you know, is it time now to potentially, you know, get more awareness out there as a routine, and to make it mandatory? There is the question. And talking of people that I interviewed, I think our last guest, somebody that, you know, we do have a bond with, we've never physically met, is Dr. George West there.
Hello.
Hello, you.
Hi, how are you?
Oh, you've grown up so much in the last year, Dr. George.
Don't say that. I'm looking older each day, believe me.
Oh, sure. Oh. I turned 40 apparently the other week, but I'm not. We don't talk about it. So, but honestly, you know, we always get emotional when we speak, because it was literally, I think it was like about 2 months after we'd had a chat. Was it 2 or 3 months after we'd had a chat on air that Eva May was diagnosed? How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. I finally got out of uni after 8 years. I started work, which is this is a very small world. Dr Uchegbu is actually my boss.
Oh, wow.
On awards, it's a very small world. So I have to be careful what I say tonight, because my boss is watching.
I was going to say, be careful what you say.
So yeah, so I started work on a diabetes ward, which has been great, but it has turned COVID, but I still get to see stuff. I'm under Dr Uchegbu, who's an amazing, she's my clinical supervisor for the year as well, so I couldn't have wished for a better person in my first year of doctoring. So yeah, it's been good.
They were the best words that you could have said there, George. Well done, that was great. But no, I mean, on a serious note, that when we first spoke, the reason that we spoke to you was because your studies, you know, you weren't able to go to hospital because obviously you're diabetic, you're a student. I think your girlfriend is a doctor as well, is that right?
Yep.
So I seem to remember, you know, and it was affecting your studies, but I'm so pleased to know that you have sort of qualified now. But you were so, you know, it struck me from the very beginning how passionate you were about raising awareness of diabetes. And I think, you know, gosh, this man he's proper on this, he's proper out there wanting to do this. And I understand it now. I totally get that now. You know, how has it been for you? Do you know what I mean? Being a student, we touched on this not so long ago, and I said I'm so glad Eva May got it young, because she, you know, her life hasn't progressed so much to be so changed by it. But you were quite a bit older, weren't you?
Yeah, so I was diagnosed at 22. So I remember coming back from summer at uni. I'd just been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, and as you know, university can be big on drinking culture, sport culture. And it was only a few months after that it kind of hit me that I couldn't do the things. Well, I hadn't learned to adapt to the things that I was used to. And I'd fallen out with friends because I wasn't going out as much. I wasn't able to play rugby because I hadn't learned to manage my sugars. So yeah, and then I realized after a day or so, I had to realize I had to turn around and I live with diabetes or I'm diabetic. And that's why I've become so passionate to turn things around. And,
I don't know about anybody else,
so,
but I don't know if anybody else's sound's gone there a little
why I
bit.
want to
Yes.
promote diabetes.
Well, it's very interesting what I can hear from you right now, George, because you do sound a little bit like a Dalek, which is quite entertaining in a way. Now he's has anyone screenshotted that? Oh, look at him.
Is that better now?
There he is. He's back.
There we go.
We've all
Maybe
screenshotted that.
I didn't switch over from the student deal, so that's why it's still slow internet. No, I'm back. It should be. Sorry, the internet dropped out. I apologise. Where did I get to?
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, it went. Yeah.
Oh.
So whatever that was, if you could. But no, you were talking about basically you had to either learn. You had to sort of say, right, I have diabetes. I am diabetic. I need to learn to manage this.
Yeah, and like you said, Eva May was diagnosed young, so I mean, I don't really, although we have memories from when we're like 7, I don't really remember what life was like when I was 7, apart from the fun things, the bad things, etc., like the life-changing memories. But I've got that memories of what life was like before I started living with diabetes. So some days I'll wake up, not grumpy, but I'll realize that my day is so much different to, I don't know, my work colleagues or my friends. I have to get up, I have to put my background insulin in, I have to carb count for breakfast, I have to pack my kit, I have to pack my needles, I have to pack my hypo kit, I have to carb count my lunch ready so I know when at lunch I can quickly put it in and eat at work. These are little things that I knew what life was like before, but so that was the challenging things that came with my diagnosis at my age.
Did you find that people around you understood it? Obviously you said at first you lost friends because you didn't go out as much and stuff like that. Were people understanding, or do you still think there could be more sort of education as a whole for people?
I think education can always be improved. I remember being diagnosed and my friends coming up to me saying, "You've got type 2 diabetes," and not that that's a problem. That just shows misunderstanding and a lack of education. And I had people saying, "What, you have to inject that every time you eat?" Or, "What's that on your arm? Like, are you all right? You can't be seen going out with that on your arm." I was like, and it just makes you think that it's just naivety, isn't it? And that's why, again, I've set out to kind of battle these misconceptions.
I don't know what happened there.
Oh, am I back? Don't.
There you are. There you are. I love it that someone's. I haven't actually made a boo boo yet, George, and that's not like me at all. But there is still time yet.
Trust it to be my internet connection. Eh?
It's fine, done. And you make so many sort of problems. So, for yourself, as a young guy that's been diagnosed with type 1, and we've talked about these sort of like different stages of life of getting it, and it crossed my mind. I was like, how, I was a bit of a girl about town back in the day. Do you know what I mean? Still am a bit. I can't imagine having to do what Eva May does or what you do just to go and have a night out with my friends. What do you think we can do about that to sort of create more awareness?
I remember, or just to divert slightly, I remember going to the student union one night about a year after I was diagnosed, and I was having a hypo. And I said, "Excuse me, I need some orange juice quick. I'm diabetic. I just need some sugar to bring my sugar levels up." And they said, "Yeah, that'd be £3, please." And it wasn't the money. I just thought, Jesus Christ, I've just said I'm diabetic. Pour the thing and then we'll sort it after.
Yeah.
It shows not only me going out preparing for what life's like with type 1 diabetes, but kind of people out there. And I've never been stopped. I can imagine it's surely a bouncer somewhere. If I had needles in my pocket, I'd be like, what are these? And I remember going out first of all and having to take this big kit. It must have been like a pencil case, and I carried it everywhere, and people would laugh at me, but that was because that's what made me feel safe. But I've
and that
become
is such a good
now.
point.
Yeah.
Because like women that have handbags, and that's sort of okay. And you know, like we say now, you know, with Eva May, I mean, don't get me wrong, I carry a rucksack with wherever she bloody goes. I won't let her go anywhere. You know, I mean, yes, we could get it down to the little pouch and everything else, but not happening, mate. I can't. I need to make sure that everything's in an arm's reach, but I'm gonna have to let go of that. You know, I'm gonna have to sort of stop that. So as a guy that's, you know, used to having everything, carrying everything around with him, it must be a security blanket.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, sometimes I'm probably a bit too relaxed, and if I see Chloe, my girlfriend's coming out with me, I just feel like she's got a bag, so when she's not looking, I'll slip a few insulin needles in there, a few jelly babies, and then I'll get shouted at because I didn't put the jelly babies in a bag and it's gone all over. But no, you need these comfort blankets, and for me, when I was diagnosed, it was my family around me that helped me get through it. So yeah.
Absolutely. Well, it sounds like you're doing an amazing job. How is, you know, now you've got that sort of balance, and you're a doctor now, and everything else. Are you finding life a lot easier? What tips would you give to people to counteract the things that we've just talked about?
I think understanding your diagnosis is the most important thing, coming to grips with it. My first year or so, I really refused to kind of accept it. Not that I was a bad diabetic. I just thought, why me? All the things that Dr. Seleena put in that bubble, I read through them. Even down to how many Oreos can I have? I don't know if anyone else saw that. I have that thought every day about
326 carbs, I think.
There we go. Thank you very much. See, and little things like that. So you need to come to grips with your diagnosis, and then you need to take every day as a learning day. It's baby steps. What I tried to do, I was like, right, I'm going to play rugby this week and go to the gym, try and get around a golfing. It's too much. Although you need to learn that, like, I actually do hate the phrase when people go, oh, you're diabetic. No, actually, I live with diabetes, and people do get a bit touchy about this. I mean, I don't care if anyone does call me diabetic, but I've learned to live with diabetes. I've learned that if I do this, I can do this. If I let my sugars go a bit high, I can play a game of rugby and they'll come back down. If I go into exercise, I can cut my insulin. So it's baby steps. You need to do what you did before. If it goes wrong, learn how to fix it and make a little mental note or a physical note.
It's such a great way of looking at it. And again, you know, there's a lot of people who are watching this right now, and my big thing was that I didn't want her life to be, you know, Eva May's life to be any different, because you are, and as Seleena said, you're still people that just has to tweak things a little bit, you know. Also there was a big sort of am I right as well with the anaerobic and aerobic exercise? We've discovered that now. And again, you know, this was something that was fairly new, that if it was a fast-paced exercise, sugars low, slower, higher. Is that right? Or is it the other way around? I can't remember now.
Yeah, generally, I find like if I'm doing weightlifting, which is more kind of anaerobic, slower, like big lifts, my sugars will just creep up and I'm like, what is going on? But if I go for, I mean, the other day, this is not to, I ran at work just to get my sugars down the stairs, and my sugars actually ended up dropping. And it just shows that how sensitive things can be.
Yeah, of course.
Especially for me as well. So
really, so is that a thing then? Is that, you know, obviously we keep saying everybody's individual, which is, you know, obviously you're all individual. So you're saying to me that certain things make you go different, but that wouldn't necessarily be the same for Eva May, and it wouldn't necessarily be the same for Carol, or it wouldn't necessarily be the same for Shirley.
Yeah, exactly. Like for me, I know that if I'm exercising on a day, so if I get up and go to the gym for work, I know that for me I need to reduce my background by 2 units, and then my meals up to after lunch, I need to half my doses of insulin. But because that works for me, it doesn't necessarily mean that it works for everyone, which is probably the most annoying thing about living with diabetes, right?
Yeah, because there wasn't one size fits all.
No.
It is as simple as that. Do you know, I've just noticed we have a listener on our show quite often called Carol, who is our oldest raver. And Carol's waving right now, if you can see Carol. So Carol is, she doesn't mind me saying this because Carol is famous on, hello, gorgeous.
Hello.
I feel like this is the first time we've had a chance to actually meet properly. So Carol has been in touch with me ever since sort of Eva May's diagnosis, in fact, before that. Carol is, you mind me saying how old you are, Carol?
76.
76 and our oldest raver. Okay, she loves camel fat. She loves going out to Ibiza. She has VIP nights out. And Carol, you were quite young, weren't you, when you were diagnosed with type 1?
Yes, I was diagnosed in 1953 when I was 8 years old.
Wow. So
And
Carol,
I was just thinking how very different things were then compared to now. But one of the things that was very different, there weren't any specialists. I was in Doncaster. The doctor at the hospital was just a physician. We were all learning. So there was very little known, you know, the diet was quite strict. But I can well remember coming out of hospital and the ward sister saying to my parents, don't make Carol an invalid. And that was the focus right from then. You know, I was encouraged to do anything I wanted to do. That was always the focus on just doing it. And I think compared to now, in some ways, the day-to-day living was easier because we haven't got all this technology. I mean, okay, there was, you know, obviously there was always the problem that things you could develop the complications, etc. But from the day-to-day living, it was actually easier because there was urine testing, there was 2 injections a day, whereas now I must be doing, at least 10, I would think. I mean, I haven't got a pump, I'm just using pens and you know, multiple injections. But yes, you know, whatever I wanted to do, I've just done it, and I'm just so grateful to be here.
no,
Because
well, we're grateful too.
My dad told me that his mother developed diabetes in 1913 before insulin, and she was only 20, and she didn't survive more than, I think, a year or 2. You know, so it's life is great.
Shall we give that a round of applause as well? I think so.
And I'm still here, you know, because the things I got up to when I was a teenager as well, I would miss insulin injections to try and keep my weight down, all sorts of things, you know. I was, things, people would say I was a bad diabetic, but I was just, you know, a person growing up and trying to cope with life and all its challenges.
She was just naughty, wasn't she? She was just naughty and long may that continue, our Carol. It's so lovely. And you know what? I thank you so much because you've been a massive support to me in telling me, you know, so many times, oh, Becky, I still go out raves. I'm 76. You know, your daughter's going to be fine, and I can relate to this and I can relate to that. And I think, George, am I right in saying, you know, sort of when these groups and what we're doing tonight is so important because of relatability.
Yeah.
George, would you say that was would you say that was really important?
Sorry, somebody just sent me a message, obviously, so I couldn't, what did you say?
I was just coming back to George right now, Carol. So I was saying about George, like, okay. You know, that's all right, darling. Yeah. George, you know, this relatability of this evening and being able to see people and hear Carol's story, and you know, and I'm hearing your story, which is going to be where my daughter's going to be in a few years' time. Not clubbing, by the way, because she'll be with me. But you know what I mean? You know, all of these things are just so nice to be able to say, yeah, we could do this.
Well, it was actually what I did after kind of like come to grips with my diagnosis. I started volunteering like the Diabetes UK weekenders, meeting other families affected by diabetes, meeting other volunteers living with diabetes, and that's where I kind of got my, you know, I can do this. We're all the same. And to quote Carol, actually, life is great, right? We've got something, we're using it to our advantage, and we're making a difference. And it is humbling. It's very humbling. And I mean, I try not cry on camera to keep, but no, I always say that I'm a better, well, I believe I'm a better person after being diagnosed. I don't know how anyone else feels.
Sorry, I'm just my partner and my kids have just come back because they've got to go to bed right now, and I'm listening to you and I've got tears rolling down my eyes, and he's thinking, what on earth's going on? And I'm pointing at saying that's Carol, the oldest raver there. You know,
Oh, what a legend!
I know, right?
I love Carol.
Carol's made our night. So listen, this is good as well, and we've gone from sort of like hosting this night, and I hope everybody else that's watching, you know, is sort of enjoying this, because you know, we've got 3 generations here. Eva May, we've got George, and then we've got Carol. And look, I mean, that's a delight, is it not? And it just goes to show that everything's amazing. Look, that's Carol's diabetic bear, look there. Isn't that beautiful, eh? So listen, I'll say good night to you, babe. We'll see you in a minute. So guys, you know, this has been so lovely. It really has. Thank you for letting me be a part of it. I feel like, you know, obviously I'm here to host this evening, but I feel like I've massively dominated by sharing, you know, sort of our side as well as from listening to your side. So you're so inspirational, all of you. And George, you know, coming back to you again, George, you are doing amazing things, mate. And I keep watching your posts on social media, and you know, you're on it. You're on it, mate. I feel like, you know, you're going to be the next big thing that makes these big changes. What is next for you? What would you like to see happen, George?
What would I like to see happen? I think it's important that now we start focusing on people that live with type 1 or type 2 that come from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. I think it's time that these people stop getting the complications, start getting the education they need, start getting the support they need, because we're also privileged now to have sensors, to have access to insulin, have the education. So that's why I set out on my social media page that I know I've been very lax with. I've been struggling to work and sort that, but I will get back to posting again. That's why I made Learn Diabetes, to help people that do have access to things like social media, but don't have access to textbooks or won't necessarily go to the doctors because whether they feel scared or worried. Yeah, so I think that's what I'd like to see next, helping those that are from less fortunate backgrounds come to grips with their diabetes and manage it well.
Definitely. Well, absolutely fantastic. And I definitely do think that will happen. And I think as well with this is, you know, from another experience, is that sometimes you have to take things in, sorry, the pun, but bite-sized chunks, because you are taking in so much. And, you know, it's all right getting the new tech, isn't it, George? And it does change your life in a way. But then I wish I could show you, but I can't say. The cabinet we have is about this wide and about, you know, however deep, just full of machinery, of different stuff, of machines to download data to, which is fantastic. But I think from what I've got from speaking to everyone, to Seleena, to Elizabeth, himself, to everyone, is that, you know, there's a lot to go in, and we've just got to do it bit by bit, and just don't put yourself under the cosh too much. You know what I mean? But you're all doing great. George, thank you. You know, always from the bottom of my heart, mate. Thank you.
Lovely to see you. I hope to meet you in real life one day.
Absolutely. Carol, you absolute legend. I'm so happy you're here. You made my blooming night, mate. Thank you. I just love everything. To everybody else as well. Obviously, if there's anybody else that would like to say anything or to ask any questions, Lindsay's just put, our group is about no shame, no blame, no need to explain. We can't be doing the stupid stigma, which is brilliant. This is to Seleena as well. She said, I've worked in GP practice in both the most deprived area in Sheffield and one of the most affluent, and I definitely saw far more diabetic complications in the area suffering from the abbreviation. Let's bring everyone along together. And yeah, let's, because people are people. Shouldn't matter, should it? Thank you so much, Lindsay. Thank you so much for organising all of this. Before we go, Lindsay, is there anything else that we would like to cover before, or any other questions from anybody?
I think Ewan's got his hand up. He's had it up for quite some time. Ewan, do you want to ask a question?
Oh, sorry, I didn't see that.
I'm not great on these systems. That's gone. You've all gone. Are you still there?
We're still here, yes, Ewan.
Oh, yes. Some of the people in the group will know my connection with diabetes. George knows it because I promised him a round of golf at Sicklehome shortly. Apart from that, my wife was one of the country's world's leading nursing diabetologists.
Very good.
And I've got an A5 sheet of notes and comments, so I better not give them. But I like to emphasize, for people who don't understand it, and I'm afraid to say quite often the medical people, about the fear of diabetes in the professional groups who are supposed to be treating it.
Yes.
Now, I've said at the voluntary group meetings more than once, and I've heard people saying their practice nurse says, oh, I don't like looking at feet. And I've also heard that of GPs. They're just afraid of it. When my wife was very ill in Western Park, a nurse said, you've got to have X units of insulin because it's being prescribed. So she said, well, I'll go hypo. So she did. Fortunately, she knew what to do about it. Another time, I was there when a nurse came to her for, I forget what, I don't know, about diabetes. And when she went away, I said to Mary, she was afraid of diabetes, and Mary said, exactly. Now, I'm afraid to say that I think there's a lot of fear in the medical and nursing profession of diabetes. Most of us, people never see it. How many times will a GP see the story of the child with abdominal pain from ketoacidosis? Well, in a surgical career, I only saw one. That's in hospital. So how many will the GPs see? Very difficult diagnosis, extremely difficult. And I would love to go on for a long time, but Dr. Thukral mentioned about how people feel about diabetes. Why me? Very much so. How do the partners feel? Mary developed diabetes while she was teaching in the Cameroon for sub-Sahara nurses. Quite by mistake, it was actually. It was some time after that that I discovered what she really felt about it. There's somebody who really knows about diabetes. She was devastated. She was terribly sad. I had a lot of difficulty helping her with her slides for a lecture after that. They were so sad. So anybody with diabetes, I wish you the best. And I wish you to know that there are other people there with you. In particular, Diabetes UK. I better stop, otherwise we'll go on past time. But I could go on and on. Thank you.
Thank you, Ewan. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I think we need a night dedicated to you, darling, because you spoke so beautifully there. That was gorgeous.
Thanks. Well, you've done a jolly good evening.
Thank you.
I've shared with Mary the anxieties of children starting off on insulin, etc., etc. Can I tell you that in the early 1980s, I was involved in trying to improve the care. It was Mary that really bulldozed this through. At one of the units in Sheffield, won't say which, in the pediatric ward, if a child was diagnosed with diabetes, they were admitted for 10 to 12 days. And at the end of that, the parents had to pass a written exam about how to manage diabetes. Now, well, I'll say no more. I think that's amazing.
Yeah, 100%. You know, and it's like we say, we picked up on so much in such a short space of time, but then you go home and you kind of like you flounder a little bit for quite some time, don't you? Really, in a way, because you're all learning on it together. Ewan, thank you so much. Anybody else got any more questions?
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, darling. Are we done for this evening then?
Think
Yes,
maybe
I'd say-
to show a slide. Could I say hello to Kuda, who's joining us from Aberdeen?
Hi,
There you go,
Lindsay.
Lindsay.
Hello.
Hi, Lindsay. Thank you so much, everyone who was here tonight. Oh my goodness me. It was very an informative session. Myself being a child who was diagnosed with diabetes when I was 9, and I'm now 37 now. And yes, I've had the experience of having to use the long needles, having to move around with, insulin vials, until having to come here to use pens and all of that. So, like now having to use a Libre 2, which alarms when you go hypo, because that's a big thing for me when my blood sugars go low, having to be that child standing in assembly, trying to, to have a biscuit or, a snack, and everyone is asking, what's wrong with her? What's that? My friends, they look at me now and they're like, oh my God, she's still alive. Because there were times when they've seen me go hypo 1,000 times and they thought I wouldn't make it. So I'm just so happy to have another community to relate to with how I feel and what my life is all about. Now having 2 kids and a husband, trying to manage all that with this ailment, like literally, I'm just so happy. It's been so good. Thank you so much, Lindsay, for remembering me and sending me the link. I really enjoyed it. And thank you, everybody, for giving me the time to speak.
Oh, I love that. Oh, you guys, beautiful. Thank you so,
Very nice,
so
Kuda.
much. Yeah, it was gorgeous. I feel like you've got, honestly, within 2 hours, I feel like it has built another little family around, hasn't it? Which which I think is the intention of this. Thank you so much. You've been amazing, and thank you to everybody for asking me to host this evening. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Lindsay,
Yes.
thank you for asking me. Shirley,
Thoroughly
as well.
enjoyed having you. I just want to remind everybody that on Saturday we're having our conference, and that's got different workshops that people can go into, how to keep type 2 in remission, all about food. So yes, come along. You can get tickets on Eventbrite, so we will definitely welcome you.
Amazing. And I think